Welcome to our session. Together, we will explore information about dyslexia, including its characteristics, how it is evaluated for and identified, what supports can be put into place for specialized intervention, accommodations, and modifications, and finally, who at the district, campus, and regional educational service center can help with any questions you may have. Before we talk about the reading difficulty that is dyslexia, it would be helpful to understand a little about reading itself. Speaking is a natural skill. Babies are born with brains that are hardwired for language, and they learn to talk by being around others. Reading is different. Humans were speaking for about 30,000 years before writing was invented. So, as a species, our brains had time to evolve hardwired structures for spoken language. Because writing is so relatively new, the species has not had time to develop a separate reading center in the brain. Reading is like software that has to be coded in. It is a complex process that does not happen rapidly. Years of practice and instruction are required. The foundation for later literacy is cemented in infancy. As babies listen to the rhythm and sounds of the language around them, they absorb spoken vocabulary and eventually learn to put words together to express thoughts as sentences. This provides a springboard for later reading and writing. When we talk about reading, we are talking about this process, connecting sounds in spoken language with printed letters or letter patterns, and then keeping them in the right order so that a word can be recognized or figured out. If a word has to be sounded out, it is known as decoding, which means to take out of a code. The code in this case is the alphabet. Letters are symbols representing sounds. The brain also has to connect individual words and then sentences in such a way that meaningful understanding or comprehension is made. Finally, the whole process has to happen with fluency. That is the ability to read words, sentences, or passages effortlessly and automatically enough so that little attention is paid to recognizing or figuring out the words. That allows the reader's mind to concentrate on understanding what is being read. If the reading is too slow or filled with too many mistakes with words, understanding can be lost. Those who already read well can forget how difficult the learning process can be. It is one of the most complex tasks a human can accomplish. Why? Because essentially learning to read means rewiring the brain, making new connections between neurons or nerve cells for what is not a natural process. Think of the reading brains of children as being under construction. Networks of neurons are making new connections between spoken language areas of the brain and visual areas in order to read. Early efforts are slow and demanding, but every time this new skill of accessing language by sight is practiced, the network of connections gets stronger and reading happens more easily. Eventually, for a skilled reader, a word can be read in less than half a second. Sometimes, despite effort, learning to read is not a smooth, easy process for a child. One of the reasons may be because of dyslexia, which is a difficulty with reading individual words. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability. These are characteristics that parents and teachers may see. Readers with dyslexia may struggle to recognize words they should know easily and may have trouble decoding unfamiliar words. When they read out loud, they may be slow or make mistakes. They may also sound labored, reading without much natural expression. If reading involves decoding or taking words out of the alphabetic code, then spelling is the flip side of that process. Spelling involves encoding or writing words down correctly using the alphabetic code. Students with dyslexia often have difficulty with correct spelling. What causes these issues? For students with dyslexia, the problem typically is difficulty with phonological awareness, which is understanding that speech sounds make up words and parts of words. One of the possible downstream effects of having difficulty with reading individual words is a possible impact on reading comprehension. When too much conscious attention goes to reading words, there's not much left for understanding what is being read. Also, students who have difficulty with reading may avoid it. That can stall the growth of their vocabulary, which also impacts understanding what is read. Because dyslexia is one of the most well-researched learning disabilities, we know a lot about it, including these things. It is neurobiological, meaning that the problems associated with it are located in the brain. Those with dyslexia are thought to have differences in the development of neuron pathways for reading, as well as how those circuits are connected. Dyslexia often runs in families, so when information is gathered for an evaluation, it is always a good idea to share whether anyone else in the immediate or extended family has been identified with dyslexia or has had other reading or learning issues. People with dyslexia vary in the severity of its impact. Dyslexia can range from mild to moderate to severe, much like a person can have a mild cold, moderate bronchitis, or severe pneumonia. Because of that range, the signs of dyslexia fall along a spectrum, and identification will involve looking for a cluster of characteristics. No single characteristic will be a decisive indicator, but several characteristics taken together will point to the possibility of dyslexia. Warning flags for the possibility of dyslexia often can be seen early, beginning with preschool and with oral language, which is the foundation for later reading. Here are some characteristics identifying risk factors associated with dyslexia. Parents and teachers will want to monitor whether these behaviors are unexpected for the child's age, educational level, or apparent capacity to learn when print is not involved. You may see difficulty with oral language, such as a delay in learning to talk, persistent baby talk, difficulty with rhyming, trouble pronouncing words or recalling the right word when speaking, problems with learning the alphabet, letter names, and corresponding sounds, issues with identifying and manipulating individual sounds and words. Difficulties with reading include guessing at words or relying on pictures, trouble with recognizing common sight words, struggles with recalling the correct sounds for letters and letter patterns, fluency difficulty. Reading may be slow, inaccurate, or without expression. Difficulty applying phonics to figure out unfamiliar words. Other risk factors include difficulty with spelling. They may have trouble remembering the sounds that letters or letter patterns represent. They may omit letters in words. They may do well on weekly spelling tests, but then make many spelling errors in daily work. They often consistently misspell common irregular words. They find homophones confusing, and they may reverse, transpose, or rotate letters. There are also difficulties with writing. They often substitute less sophisticated words for those that may be hard to spell, using big instead of enormous. They may have problems completing written assignments, especially longer ones. They may have good ideas but struggle to write them in an organized way. They make errors copying from the board or a book. And they may have poor or illegible handwriting, sometimes to the point of not being able to reread their own writing. What else might you see? They tend to avoid reading, and they don't read for pleasure often. They're resistant to reading out loud. They would rather rely on listening than reading for comprehension. They become frustrated with the amount of time required and the energy expended for reading. They have difficulty with the volume of reading and written work, trouble with note taking. Their oral answers are often better than their written responses. They may struggle to finish tests on time, and there may be deflated self esteem that can look like a lack of motivation. Are there any positives? Absolutely. Those with dyslexia typically have strengths in areas not impacted by the learning disability. When the unexpected difficulty of reading words is taken out of the equation, these students usually will have adequate achievement. Because of this, one of the key criterion in identifying dyslexia is the unexpectedness of the reading difficulties given the student's other abilities. This is known as the Sea of Strengths model, which emphasizes the many aspects of higher level critical thinking and creativity that surround the print weakness in those with dyslexia. The average ability to learn in the absence of print is a key piece of information in determining unexpectedness and hence dyslexia. This is a user-friendly synopsis of what dyslexia is and how it affects students. Dyslexia is a language-based learning disability. Dyslexia refers to a cluster of symptoms which result in people having difficulties with specific language skills, particularly reading. Students with dyslexia usually experience difficulties with other language skills, such as spelling, writing, and pronouncing words. Dyslexia affects individuals throughout their lives. However, its impact can change at different stages in a person's life. It is referred to as a learning disability because dyslexia can make it very difficult for a student to succeed academically in the typical instructional environment, and in its more severe forms, will qualify a student for special education, special accommodations, or extra support services. Many resources are available to those interested in learning more about dyslexia. For questions specific to the process in Texas for referral, evaluation, identification, and intervention delivery, the Dyslexia Handbook will be especially useful. The newest edition, updated in November 2018, implements statutory requirements added by the 85th Legislature. The handbook, a link to which can be found at the TEA website referenced here, provides guidelines for school districts to follow as they identify and provide services to students with dyslexia and related disorders. Also, detailed is information regarding the state's dyslexia laws and their relation to the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. The other websites listed under Parent Resources give reliable information about dyslexia. The websites in the Also box offer details about audiobooks and support services for schools and students. The identification and intervention process for dyslexia can be multifaceted, involving state and federal requirements. Terms parents will want to be aware of are RTI, which is an abbreviation for Response to Intervention, IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. RTI, Response to Intervention, is a tiered intervention process designed to meet the academic and behavior needs of students. The interventions are provided at increasing levels of intensity. Progress monitoring informs instruction, and data drives decision making. Parental notice is required. The 85th legislature in 2017 made changes in the Texas Education Code, part of which requires schools to provide parents with notice whenever their child begins to receive intervention strategies, such as RTI. The notice must include a reasonable description of the assistance, about how long the intervention will be provided, the estimated time frame for reporting on the child's progress, as well as goals stated for when the child would exit the intervention. More information is available on the TEA website. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. There's a funding law ensuring a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, for students with disabilities who meet specific category requirements. It provides services and supports specially designed to meet unique needs. This is also known as special education. Parental consent is required. Section 504. This is a civil rights statute protecting students with disabilities from discrimination. It ensures equal opportunity for eligible students when compared to non-disabled peers, providing a free, appropriate public education. It provides support and accommodations to meet individual needs through general education. Parental consent is required. What is involved in a dyslexia evaluation in Texas? Chapter 2 in the 2018 Dyslexia Handbook addresses screening in kindergarten and grade 1. All of Chapter 3 is about the evaluation process. Here are some highlights about the procedures. If a school or parent suspects the possibility of dyslexia, a team of knowledgeable persons, including the parents, would discuss data collected, its implications, and student need. That database discussion could result in a referral under IDEA or Section 504, or continuation of tiered intervention. Parents, guardians always have the right to request a referral for a dyslexia evaluation at any time. All public school students in kindergarten and grade 1 must be screened for dyslexia. Unless an ARD committee or Section 504 committee determines that the screener is not appropriate, or if the student is already identified with dyslexia. Also, grade 2 students must be screened, as must any grade 7 student who did not pass STAR reading the previous year. Additionally, students enrolled in public schools must be evaluated for dyslexia and related disorders at appropriate times. In the first step of the evaluation process, schools will collect data on students, as well as current information from a variety of sources, including parent, guardian input. A team of knowledgeable persons, including the parents, will review the cumulative data to determine the initial evaluation pathway, whether it will be through Section 504 or through IDEA. The decision about which pathway to choose will be a data-informed one for each student on an individual basis. If the team suspects, based on the data, that the student has a disability and a need for special education services as a result, the evaluation will be under IDEA, following procedural safeguards, and after the parent has given consent. If the data leads the team to believe the student may need interventions and accommodations specific to the suspected dyslexia, rather than special education services, then the evaluation will be under Section 504, following procedural safeguards, and after the parent has given consent. When the team's review of data does not lead to a suspicion of dyslexia, a related disorder, or other disability, the student will not be referred for an evaluation at that time, although he or she may receive additional support in the classroom or through the RTI process. When the decision is made to evaluate, tests related to educational needs in the academic area will be given, including these 5 bulleted items: letter knowledge, word reading and decoding, fluency, spelling, and comprehension. Because the core deficit in dyslexia problems typically is with phonological skills, that is an area that will also be assessed, as will rapid naming of objects or symbols, like letters and numbers. Rapid naming skills have been linked to reading accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. Once the formal evaluation has been completed, the appropriate committee, either IDEA or 504, will meet to review and interpret test results and all other pertinent data gathered about the student. The committee will answer the 3 questions shown in the blue box. If the committee answers yes to the first 2 questions, it will then decide whether the difficulties are unexpected in relation to the student's other abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Formal and informal data will be considered, with the committee looking for a preponderance of data rather than a single indicator for unexpectedness. A last note: additional considerations are outlined in the Dyslexia Handbook when determining dyslexia in an English language student. If dyslexia is identified, the committee has additional questions to consider. For an evaluation being conducted through Section 504, the committee would also determine whether the student meets 504 eligibility criteria. If the answer is yes, then a 504 plan will be developed based on the data and with parent participation. That plan typically will include receiving standard protocol dyslexia instruction, which is a term describing the essential critical elements of a program. The individual needs of each student must still be met. Besides such extra instruction, the student also may receive accommodations related to his or her disability. For an evaluation being conducted through IDEA, the Admission, Review, and Dismissal, or ARD committee, will determine the student is eligible under IDEA criteria as a student with a specific learning disability and, because of dyslexia or a related disorder, needs special education. If the student is IDEA eligible, an individualized education program known as an IEP will be developed by the committee, including the parent. An IEP details the services, supports, and specialized instruction the student will receive in school. If a student with dyslexia is found eligible for special education, the IEP must include appropriate reading instruction that includes the components and delivery of dyslexia instruction detailed in the handbook. This slide explains the what of an evidence-based reading program that is used for students with dyslexia. These are the elements that lessons incorporate. Additional information can be found in Chapter 4 of the Dyslexia Handbook. The components of dyslexia instruction include phonological awareness. These are skills that include identifying and manipulating units of oral language. Sound symbol association. This is the knowledge of how various speech sounds link with letters and letter combinations, usually taught with an explicit phonics approach. Syllabication. Knowledge of the 6 basic syllable types in English and syllable division rules. Orthography. Understanding of the written spelling patterns and rules of English. Morphology, the study of structure and form of words in a language, including prefixes, suffixes, inflectional endings, like adding s to book to make it plural. Syntax, the study of the rules and patterns when writing grammatical sentences and phrases. Reading comprehension, understanding and interpreting what is read. And reading fluency, the ability to read with appropriate rate, accuracy, and proper expression. Research shows that the way dyslexia instruction is taught also makes a difference. The way in which the intervention program is delivered will include all of these. It will be simultaneous and multisensory. This means it incorporates the use of 2 or more sensory pathways: auditory, hearing; visual, with your eyes; kinesthetic, with movement; and tactile, with touch, using 2 of them at the same time. Systematic and cumulative. It means that the instruction has a planned sequence that builds upon itself, from easy to more difficult. Explicit instruction. Its focus is clear, and modeling of key skills is essential. Diagnostic teaching to automaticity. Individualizes teaching for automaticity. We don't move on until the child has the skill. Synthetic instruction. This teaches students how to blend sounds to create words. And analytic instruction teaches how to break words down into component parts. Because of the highly structured and systematic delivery approach of effective dyslexia intervention, those delivering it must be trained in the program used by the school and must implement it with fidelity. Those providing dyslexia intervention are not required to hold a specific license or certification. However, they must, at a minimum, have additional documented training in dyslexia and related disorders, as well as in the intervention curriculum being used. Students with dyslexia will often need accommodations in classroom work and assignments in order to have effective and equitable access to grade level instruction in the general education classroom. Accommodations do not alter what is being taught and do not bypass instruction. They are meant to provide support for the learning. Listed here are some examples of reasonable classroom accommodations. However, it is important to remember that the choice of the accommodations must be individualized to the student and to his or her needs. The impact of dyslexia will vary with each student, so there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Accommodations must be individualized. While the ARD or Section 504 committee will determine accommodations, students should be involved in their selection when it's appropriate. Some examples of accommodations include note-taking assistance, alternative test location to reduce distractions, word banks, audiobooks, formula charts, and adaptive learning tools and features in software programs. Instruction is the first priority. Not all classroom accommodations are allowed during a state assessment. The Texas Education Code that defines dyslexia also includes a paragraph on disorders that were thought to be related to dyslexia. These 4 were included in that paragraph. Included here is the Texas Education Agency definition for each, as well as who should conduct an evaluation. Developmental auditory imperception is the inability to receive and understand sounds and words. This is assessed by audiologist or a speech and language pathologist. Dysphagia is a delay in development of comprehension and or expression of oral language. This is assessed by speech and language pathologist. Developmental spelling disorder. Significant difficulty learning to spell in the absence of reading difficulties. This should be assessed by someone trained in dyslexia and the reading process. Finally, dysgraphia. This is the inability to write legibly. It should also be assessed by someone trained in dyslexia and the reading process. Because of recent research in the area of dysgraphia, a chapter on it was added to the 2018 update of the Dyslexia Handbook. That section defines dysgraphia and outlines characteristics that parents and teachers may see. It also notes that a student with only dysgraphia will not have reading difficulties. Chapter 5 additionally gives guidance about evaluation, identification, and provision of services for students with dysgraphia. It is similar to the approach taken with dyslexia. Working in partnership with parents to support our students with dyslexia or a related disorder is a top priority for Friendswood ISD. If you have questions or concerns, you may contact Daria Driscoll in Friendswood ISD. Additionally, the state offers a hotline to a highly knowledgeable person trained in dyslexia. Thank you for your time and attention.